standby over the phone. I will be introducing her shortly. But what is the conversation about? The use of indigenous languages in the workplace. I have an HR professional, Tutie Danjuma, over the phone. Good afternoon to you, ma'am. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon, Denise.
Yeah.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing this with me on this short notice. I am super, super grateful.
You're welcome.
All right. So by way of introduction, I will start by saying that the world of work is more like a melting pot. Most employers recognize the benefits of a diverse workforce and seek to promote equality. That is why in every organization that you step foot in, you will find people from different cultures, different tribes, and in some cases, different race as well. I mean, if you have been privileged to travel outside the country, you find organizations that has a mix of Indians, Chinese, English-speaking natives, French-speaking natives, and all of that. In Nigeria, you would see Hausa, you see Yoruba, you would see Igbo, and you would even see the white men, as we would like to put it. Now, let me give a practical example of what the civil service space here in Rivers State looks like. At least I am one who had to visit their offices over time to do certain things. So let's look at our state secretariat. I don't know if you've ever been to Rivers State Secretariat before, but if you have, this will sound very, very familiar. No matter the office you are going to, you will most likely find riverine people as employees. And you hear certain things like this. Nda, umbra, tobra, you know, all of those things. And then if you listen long enough, you will hear them having conversations in their indigenous languages. I mean, I had to use that because this is River State, of course, and it's something that maybe a vast majority of us can connect with as an example. But from the above example, it may seem extremely difficult to somewhat justify imposing a specific language outside of working duties. For example, during work breaks or casual conversations between colleagues. In the same way, blanket rules involving the use of a particular language within the workplace may also be difficult to objectively justify, unless, of course, there are good business reasons for it. For instance, Woke and Sons, situated in Onitsha, would most likely have an Oga who is Igbo, and apprentice, the Wa Boy story, who are Igbo-speaking citizens as well. So the language of engagement in that space will be a mixture of English and the Igbo language. It can even be used as the language of trade. So you will hear something like Woke, Ibolachi, this tire, egole, something of that nature. And everybody does business and everybody happy. Nobody feels strange about some things like that. But you can't go to Abuja or maybe somewhere like River State or maybe somewhere like Delta State and you want to do business when you know that you have a mixture of people from other languages doing business with you. So yes, it can cause a case of an employer and an employee having some sort of squabble as to what language should be used at the workspace. So to you, the listener, I'm asking two direct questions. Do you consider it appropriate or inappropriate for individuals to use their indigenous languages at the workplace? And if you work in an organization, tell us, what is your organization's policy on the use of indigenous languages at the workplace? Now head on to our social media handle on X. We have at Nigeria Info PH, and our Facebook page, you can watch us live, is Nigeria Info 92.3 PH. Send us a message on WhatsApp. WhatsApp and Telegram number remains 0809 030 6416. Again, 0809 030 6416. In due time, I'll call out the phone lines and I'll have to take your calls and then read all of your messages. Now, Mrs. Tutu, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
You are the HR professional, and having listened to all that I've highlighted, can you relate with any of the examples I have given so far?
Very, very well. Very, very well. It's typical, and we see this happening on a regular, daily basis. I'm sure in offices right now, people are speaking their language on the office. So it's typical. However, starting from the Nigerian labor law, there is nothing there's no legislation on language. Speaking of indigenous language, yes, in the law, whether it's to be prohibited or not, it's not in legislation.
Interesting.
So, yes. So, yes, we have private organizations or who might put it in their policy, in their handbook, to prohibit speaking of indigenous language based on inclusivity and all. That is per company or per organization. There is no legislation for that. Now, also, if you look at it from the point of the Western organizations, there's actually an Equality Act in 2010, that states that language is language has, let me put it this way, language is linked to nationality and race. So, because language is directly linked to nationality and race, it is unlawful under the Equality Act 2010, right, in the UK, for it to be prohibited, meaning that it's allowed, for people of different races, to speak their language because it enhances inclusivity. So it will be racial discrimination if you put a law on not allowing people speak their language in the workplace.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Very interesting. However,
because I was going to ask the general rule of thumb concerning indigenous language use at the workplace, both in the private and public sector. Since you had clearly stated that it has not been captured in our labor laws yet.
Yet. So basically, policies, workplace policies might have it in their own books or in, their own handbook or policy to say, do not, for certain reasons, for professionalism, for security reasons as well, because there have been cases where even abroad or in the UK, where this Equality Act has been instituted, where there are still some private organizations that might still maybe insist on just English based on security reasons, but you must have to meet certain criteria, because if it is taken to the court of law, you must have strong reasons beyond reasonable doubt why you have put this as a law or as a policy in your organization, because you can be taken to court and the employee may win over the employer for discrimination. So So if it can be stated by the employer why it has been put, for maybe security reasons or something, right, it has to be clearly stated why you felt there was a breach in that. So it has been instituted. So coming back to Nigeria, yes, we also have certain organizations that have it in their policy that English should be the lingua franca in the workplace for communication and front desk interface, speaking with customers, and having that professional outlook, depending on what your organization or the service is you are rendering to your clients, right? They could put a clause, or they can be a policy about language. And sometimes they are even fined. So the policies may include, if you speak an indigenous language while at work, there's a fine, there are disciplinary actions for that. But that's any employee who works there will have to sign to that. If you're not comfortable with the policy, then, it's part of the contract. So that's different. But like I said, there is no law. Now, when it comes to etiquette, right, most times it is deemed rude or inconsiderate when you are working with your colleagues on a particular, work or something, and they are speaking a particular language. Let's say you are the only person who doesn't speak. I don't want to call it language now, but if they're all speaking one particular language and you're all working in a project, for example, it's a teamwork, and they're speaking a language that you don't understand, it's not inclusive. It's a little bit discriminatory. So it would be advised that please speak the language everybody can understand and can relate for communication's sake. So for etiquette reasons, we would prefer a particular language to be spoken. However, if you were to be in if I'm to take it abroad again, if you were to be in Germany and the lingua franca is German, you won't be caught speaking English in that environment because it's not inclusive. All right. So it depends on the location you are, what has been agreed for that particular organization, the language of communication. That will depend on what language should be spoken. However, again, there are other times where there are exceptions to the rule. So, for example, even when you are interfacing with a customer, and obviously that organization maybe is to speak English, but the customer is not English speaking, and they can speak a particular dialect, maybe it's Yoruba or Igbo, or Chinese, as the case may be, and that front desk person can speak that language. For communication reasons, the person will have to speak the language that other person understands to communicate and have the service rendered. So it's very dicey, but like I said, there is no legislation that prohibits language. However, for civility's sake, right, most organizations will say or put a policy that wants to make everybody included, to speak a particular language for communication in that particular organization. So that's basically it, really.
Now, having listened to you, you did mention something centered around discrimination. And I think that's the part that most people have experienced. You are in a workspace, you share the same workspace with people, and before you know it, you see two of your colleagues doing what we call cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. And they are not doing the cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. They're not doing the side talks in English language. So, 1 minute you're wondering, are they talking about me? Are they talking about our Oga? What are these people talking about? You try to put your ears down to listen, and then before you know it, you feel left out at the end of the day. But then again, the people who speak these languages, in their defense, will tell you there's some gist they want to gist. In the way they say it in English, is not sweet. They have to speak it. In short, there are some words they need to say in the language for you to get the message. If it is not in the language, it is not it. So they are either code switching or code mixing or whatever it is that they do. And maybe the boss walks in and then, what are you guys doing? And then one person just feels the need to go and report to HR that I don't understand these my colleagues in marketing. Every time they come to work, and that. I don't understand. Please, what is umbra? I mean, I have heard instances like this where people said something and the person will call somebody that speaks that same language. I beg, what's in this thing mean? So what other possible issues may arise from indigenous language use at the workplace? Beyond security reasons and, of course, the discriminatory reasons.
Okay. When it comes to speaking vernacular or indigenous language, right, I'll come from a different angle too, because to be quite honest with you, depending on where you find yourself, certain languages too opens doors for you. Okay. Yes, so it links people with certain people. It makes the connection, because language is communication it's connection, right? So in that regard, where in a sense it helps either sometimes may help the flow of work, may help the connection, may open doors, can cause your work to be, or the service that you are to deliver or is being delivered to you to be swift. Sometimes language may come into place, and it opens those doors. Basically, that's what I'm just trying to say.
I think I can relate with that, because there are times when sometimes you go for an interview. I'm only looking at your CV. The person at the board recognizes a familiar indigenous name.
Exactly.
And then before you know it, they are greeting you in that language.
That language. Yeah.
They say baoni, and then you are. I mean, I'm sure a lot of prospective employers are in a fix as to whether to respond in English at that point in time or to respond in the language, because your chances of getting that job may depend on how you respond.
Well, yes, sometimes. But however, just like you're saying too, for a professional outlook, ideally, English should be the professional thing to do. However, if the organization, for example, like you use Yoruba, if it is a very Yoruba organization, so to speak, there's a buy-in to know that you can speak the language, even if sometimes you are not Yoruba from your name, and you could speak the language. Right? There's a buy-in, there's a trust, you are part of us, you can be included, into the organization. Sometimes that, as I said, opens doors and is a connection. And if we see it happen even in the market, if you go into the market and it's Igbo, right? The language for
trade,
of trade, yes. And you speak Igbo, there are certain concessions, there are certain things you will get that somebody who comes and speaks English may not get.
I can agree.
Or you go to a Yoruba speaking place or a Hausa speaking place, you just speak Hausa. My brother, I will give you free stuff sometimes.
Plenty jara in the suya.
Plenty jara, exactly. Because of what language does, that connection, that communication, that camaraderie of language, right? So yes, there is that, right? But I think the downside is where people feel excluded or feel being, not discriminated, so to speak, because they can't speak a particular language, or certain people are speaking a particular language and they can't understand it, and they are, pushed aside. In that regard, it's not ethical. In fact, it now even becomes discriminatory again, as somebody can even file for discrimination. I'm being discriminated because I don't speak the language here. That's another problem, right? So it's dicey. It's dicey. So it now depends on the organization, right? How they want to relate. Yes, there's also the place where ideally there shouldn't be anything wrong with maybe during the break time. You're not having any proper work communication thing going. Maybe just two colleagues who are from the same place and just somewhere in the canteen or somewhere, and they're speaking the language, just two of them having a private chat. That's up to them. It's that shouldn't necessarily be an issue, because they don't have a third party in there who's not understanding what they're saying. It's just between both of them. Ideally it should be fine. But when it is a boardroom meeting, for example, and the leaders of the meeting are speaking a particular language, when they know everybody there doesn't understand that language, it's rude. It's not professional. Let me put it that way. It's not professional. So we need to be considerate about the people around us. But it's very difficult to say do not speak this particular language. It's difficult. You could only try, right? Depending on your organization. But like I said, in law, there is no legislation in Nigeria that speaks against it.
Okay, now you've highlighted how dicey it can be. On one hand, is someone who chooses to file a report stating discriminatory claims. On the other hand, is the possibility of someone who considers it infringement on their freedom of expression if you prohibit what's it called now, indigenous language in the workplace. Now, as HRO, how do you handle some of these things?
Well, like I said, certain organizations have it as a policy, meaning that once you've signed up to be in that organization, you've signed a contract, you are agreeing with all the policies they have stated there. So if you are in breach to now, after you sign, to say, yeah, you're happy with the language prohibition thing, and you now turn and say, oh, it's there, I'm not exercising my human rights, they are discriminating me. But you signed, you agreed because of so and so reasons that this policy has been applied, and you've agreed with it. So in a sense, in that regard, there's a tendency that if you bring a case to court to say, it's discriminatory, but there's the clause of you signed, so it's dicey. However, from an HRO perspective, there are certain organizations, like I said, where we have implemented the language, the indigenous, not speaking or prohibiting indigenous language, and even pidgin, pidgin language, it's in the policy, yes.
Sorry, that, on a lighter note, HRO, human relations, which one will you prefer? Somebody that is speaking cut and join English, and somebody that can express his or herself fully in what's it called now? Pidgin. You want to hear is as is, and so.
So it's like I said, it's dicey, and there is a relaxed rule, because I know for even certain organizations, to be honest, where from the HR perspective, we've put it into law or into the policy that indigenous language and even pidgin is prohibited. People keep breaking the law because they just feel like, see, this we can't skip to this. In fact, someone that will tell you, sorry, they'll speak the pidgin and say, find me if you have to find me. Sorry, I'll pay the fine. I'm sorry. This one, English will not cut it. I'm sorry, it's not my mother tongue. See, it's all part of the colonialists trying to make us, do what they want us to do. So people would, come with their different perspectives to it and say, please, free me, I beg. So it could be challenging, but this is where HR2 has to be a little bit flexible as well. There are sometimes, to be honest, sometimes we may turn a blind eye, like we didn't hear it, because how many people are you going to find? And as long as it's not infringing on the work, to be honest, it's not infringing on the work, or it's not causing the place to be toxic, or it's not causing anybody to, not deliver, then it could be overlooked. Let me put it that way. Overlooked. But if it is affecting the work, if it is creating a toxic workplace, if it is hampering the business, then it's an issue. The HR will step in and be firm on implementing that policy. So I think that's the way forward.
I'm going to open the phone lines now. 0817-923-0002. Once again, 0817-923-0002. The question to you, the listener: do you consider it appropriate or inappropriate for individuals to use their indigenous languages at the workplace? Now, you are not HR. HR has spoken. You, the employer, and the employee, it's your turn. And of course, what is your organization's policy on the use of indigenous languages? Like Tutie had mentioned, for some organizations, it's not spelled out. There's no rule book. There's nothing of that nature prohibiting it. However, for the benefit of the employees who may feel some type of way having their colleagues doing, and they don't know what it means, well, how do you feel about it? I have some messages on WhatsApp, by the way. WhatsApp and Telegram number remains 0809-030-6416. Denise and your guest in the studio, I don't know what you people are talking about. Can you ever stop a Yoruba man from speaking his language anywhere? Go and visit Tinubu. The only group of people whom I may say are not proud of their identity and languages are the Akwa Ibom people. Really? They speak English even when you greet them in their dialect. They will respond in English language. I encountered an Akwa Ibomite once. So while I kept greeting the person in my dialect, the person was always responding in English language. So I kept on using the dialect. I give kudos to the Yoruba for speaking their language anytime. That was not my experience in New York. At least I had stayed in New York for a while. Everywhere you go to in New York, you go to a shop, they first use their language until you start telling them, I'm not from this place. So, Barry from Ajib. Hi, Barry. Welcome to the conversation. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Barry. How are you doing today?
Yes. You see, I don't understand that the language is power. That was a time I went to and
Barry, your line is very unclear. Please call us back, Barry. Funny how Nigerians will travel abroad to places like China, Germany, etc., for example, and do everything possible to learn those people's language so that it can be easy for them. But same person from here won't want to learn another man's tribe language here because according to him, if he does, his mother tongue will die. It didn't die when you are speaking German or Italian, but it will only die if you are from example, Ogoni or Calabari, and you are being forced to speak Ikwere because your company is in Port Harcourt. For me, the solution is Nigeria should make the Pidgin English our official language because China have more languages than Nigeria, but they have a certain language you all understand, like the Nigerian Pidgin. NS from Woji. Eric Chukuma says, I wish you take an Akwa Ibom transport service to Abuja or Lagos at night. You will feel alienated by the dominant language and for sure you will be afraid. You'll be afraid. I'm going to read some more comments from Facebook and have your final thoughts. Tutie. Jaja Domede says it's inappropriate because of the multilingual culture of Nigeria and our dear River State. You hardly find a workplace having all workers from same language in Nigeria or even in River State. This is our final caller as we have to round up the conversation. Nigerian folk, good afternoon to you and welcome. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Denise. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Name and where you're calling from. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, my name is Mira.
Mira, you're welcome. Go ahead.
Look, Denise, I think it's wrong to speak indigenous language in the office. The public is very privileged. They do it well as a normal, as if it's normal. But in private, maybe they have one or 2 ways. Look, Denise, to promote just speaking is fighting, honestly. You sit down there and they'll be answering you as they'll finish it from everything, so you know what's happening. And they'll come back and smile so I think it's wrong. If it's possible to stop it entirely, it's better. But trust me, it's almost impossible with our brothers in the East. No, you can't. It's almost impossible for them to meet themselves and not speak their language. But
thank you so much, Muriel. We have to go. Ma'am Tutie Danjuma has been our guest for today. She is human relations, HR professional. She's also a coach, a John Maxwell coach trainer, certified coach trainer, and of course, speaker. Thank you so much for your time. We're super, super grateful. I have some more messages to read, but probably after we come back from the news break at 1. Final words from you.
Okay, thank you again for still talking on languages at the workplace. When you are talking. So for that reason, ethically, I would say speak the language that is acceptable in your workplace, right? And include as much as possible, speak the language that includes everybody and doesn't create a toxic environment or people feeling left out. You know, let us speak the language of love. Let's speak the language, you know, that brings people together, not divides them. That's for me the main thing. Be ethical, be fair, be considerate when you speak, when you're using language in the workplace. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am. And for those of you who have sent a plethora of messages after the news, I will honor quite a long read from one of our listener. I'll just read them quickly before we'll go on to the conversation for the 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock hour. Every day I come to work, I experience something. Today, one of those things I experience would be making it to our conversation chit chat. Customized plate numbers. I haven't seen that in a while, and I saw that today. How do you feel about them? After trending stories, stay tuned to us.